was a cold and a dusty morning. When the women went to gather water at the well, it's when they went, in the cool of the morning before it got too hot. As they walked along, they'd chatter and they'd catch up with each other. What did you do yesterday? What's your family? How's little Joseph? What's going on in Zechariah's life? How's Malachi doing? Oh, I do hope Ruth and Deborah are behaving themselves. They'd go and they'd gather water at the well. They'd catch up, talk about their husbands, put the world to rights, and then walk back enjoying each other's company. All except one woman who always had to walk alone and had to wait until the middle of the day because she wasn't quite acceptable to everyone else. You see, she'd had a few run-ins with other men, and the guy that she was with now was her fifth partner. So she wasn't really a good Jew. She wasn't really a good Samaritan woman. There'd always been this enmity between the Samaritans and the Jews anyway. They'd always fought because hundreds of years before the story I want to mention to you as we think tonight, the Samaritans had set up an alternative to Jerusalem in the north. They'd built an alternative temple. They'd built an alternative place to worship. They'd done things their way. Why travel all the way south to Jerusalem, particularly when that pesky two tribes of Judah were so difficult to get on with anyway? Why not just build your own temple, your own alternative service of worship, your own alternative flows and sacrificial system? Why not just do it all yourself? Everybody could come, nobody would know any difference, and so they did. At Bethel, they set up alternatives, and they became very powerful and prosperous, and everything was vibrant and packed, and you had to squeeze in. Except it wasn't what God wanted. So this enmity between the Samaritans and the good Jews, because the Samaritans were a bastardized race, had sprung up. And as a result, when Jesus walked the earth in earthly ministry, the Samaritans and the Jews hated each other. Not that they were unrelated. They were more like the Catholics and the Protestants of Northern Ireland. They hate each other too. At least they did. Or the Serbs and the Croats. So this one Samaritan woman, stuck in a Jewish context, having had too many partners for everybody else's liking, had to go and get water on her own. And one afternoon, she met a Jew who asked her to give him water. The story's told in John's Gospel. But the amazing reality of the story is that it goes on to talk about worship. Because here's a woman that's being rejected. Here's a woman that's on her own. And Jesus, the Messiah, comes and doesn't tell her things. He says, "Would you get me some water?" She says, "Yeah, of course I will." She's a kind woman. She puts her pail down into the well and gets him some water. And when she pulls it up, they end up having a conversation, which leads to one of the most remarkable revelations of Christian faith before Christianity was born, that we have been reflecting on for 2,000 years ever since. You see, this woman says, well, we Samaritans worship on a different mountain. We do things differently. We have a different set of approaches to worship. We aren't the same as the Jews. And Jesus says, yes, but those that my Father wants to worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. He's talking to an outcast, a rejected woman, and yet he touches on the very heart of what it means to have a spiritual life. And tonight I want to spend about half an hour, 25 minutes, half an hour, talking to you about vibrant spirituality. Because Jesus' response to that woman was remarkable. We'll come to it in a minute. But there are still lots of arguments and debates about what vibrant spirituality looks like. Can I explain, by the way, the number and the name that will appear on the screen again and again? I'm so glad that you're using Twitter and a text phone here. I do it all the time. I'd love you to continue this conversation, not just tonight, but through the week. So please turn your mobile phone on. Don't turn it off. You don't get a chance to be able to do that very often. And if you want to send a text, then send it to that number for tonight. I think the hashtag that you mentioned was #AskGo2012 if you're on Twitter. I wonder how many of you are on Twitter. Could you raise your hand? Okay. Welcome to the other 500 million people in the world that are on Twitter. What about Facebook? Oh, more on Facebook. Well, there's just about 1 billion people on Facebook now. There are 2 billion Christians, 1 billion people on Facebook. Quite a remarkable figure. The name on the on one side of the slide is my Facebook or my Twitter name. So I'd love to continue the conversation. and the text phone number is for a conference phone that I hold. It's not my private number, thank goodness. So if you ring it, I won't answer it. But if you text it, I will look at some of that, and we'll try to have a conversation tonight. When I use the word worship or spirituality, which is what I really want to focus on, I wonder what you think of. When you Google it, you come up with lots of lovely ethereal pictures. Pictures of lovely woodland or a nice stone walk with mist, gentle dialogues, or pictures like this, which I thought was rather odd, which was from a Reformed website, which looks rather like a set of bars to me, but I don't want to go into that too deeply. I guess it's supposed to represent life and hope and dawn and shadows being dispersed and beauty. I guess that's what it's supposed to represent. It's not what it represents to me. Or this, when I Googled Christian spirituality, there's what I got. Isn't that lovely? I don't quite know what it has to do with Christian spirituality. The color, the hue, the depth, the sorrow of autumn. We could have a long dialogue about that. Now, there's one that we would have expected to get, isn't it? Well, I hope you would have expected to get the Bible somewhere in Christian spirituality, vibrant Christian faith. The Bible right at the center, the unmoved book that guides us in all matters of faith, conduct, and character and doctrine. If you come from a conservative position like I do, then you would hold on to that and you would celebrate it, and a well-worn Bible at that. Recently, I conducted the funeral of I was part of the group that conducted the funeral of a wonderful woman in our church called Barbara. Barbara was in her 90s. Her husband is the only surviving Spitfire pilot in Britain. And he lives about 1.5 miles, 2 miles from here. And there were two things that Barbara's family showed at her funeral. They were fantastic. One was a Bible that had been held together by black insulation tape, I think since insulation tape was invented. And the other was one of those little memo notepads, the A6 size ones. You know the ones you buy in the corner shop? They're red or yellow. They're rather garish in color, but very small. And it was her prayer book, falling to pieces, because this was a woman who knew how to pray, and she knew how to read her Bible. Whatever else we talk about tonight, remember that at the heart of Christian spirituality is prayer and Bible reading. I know it sounds old-fashioned, and I know it sounds like I'm teaching my granny to suck eggs, speaking to illustrious people like you. But don't think for a minute that you can replace opening the Bible and taking a few moments with God on a regular basis with something else. Without it, we end up shallow. Without that depth and that anchor point in our lives, when storms come to hit us, we will be blown off course. Another picture was this one, which looks like it's come right out of the Good News Bible, doesn't it? I think that's someone praising. I think it might be Christ because of the two marks on either hand. All of those are images of spirituality. But as we look at what vibrant spirituality looks like, what we've got to remember is that it is wedded, it's embedded right in the midst of life.